Hi, and welcome back to MD, PhD, ETC. I'm your host, Dr. Captain Dr. Robert McClay, and that title's going to play into something today because I've been bouncing around an idea in my mind about the idea of masculine thinking and toxic masculinity versus the positives of that. And I'll say I come to this from someone who, as the title implies, is both an academic, the doctor part of that, both a neuroscience PhD and background in medicine, particularly psychiatry, which has sort of preceded the world in negative views of masculine thinking, but also a father who is raising boys and someone who is reached the rank of captain in the Navy, who came in thinking perhaps that I was going to reform these meatheads, teach them how to open up to their more feminine side, their more intellectual side, and that would increase their resilience, ability to succeed, stop these negative interactions. And I do like to think that I helped people along the way, but I admit what surprised me is how much these hyper-masculine men, and actually some cases hyper-masculine women, who did amazing things, members of the SEALs and the Green Berets and the CIA, and people who just survived things that you would think were unsurvivable, who pushed through amazing obstacles in life, both physically and mentally, who bonded in ways that maybe weren't my style, but allowed them to build deep and meaningful friendships and relationships, allowed them to build codes of honor. How much there was of benefit in this, and how sad it was that perhaps in modern thinking that we have started to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or in this case maybe the big hulking beneficial male superhero out with the view of that as being babyish or insecure. So, because I do think society has changed on this and we've lost something in that regard. Now, this isn't an attempt to put down new generations or anything like that. But I think that even for someone who was a nerd who did not view himself as super masculine in this, when I was growing up, my generation, I'm a little older, I'm in my early 50s at this point, and I grew up in the 80s a lot. There were things like this Marine Corps recruiting ad that were on television and inspired people despite being a little hokey. Let's take a look at it for a second.
It is more than a trial by fire. It is a rite of passage, a challenge to join the elite. And if you succeed, if you can master your fear, outsmart your enemy, and never yield even to yourself, you will be changed forever. The few, the proud, the Marines.
So what did you think of that? Was that inspirational? Again, not too long ago, it seemed to be effective in bringing people into the Marine Corps. And what were the messages there? There was something about the warrior ethos and masculinity that was something to be admired and obtained, that it had to be earned through a series of obstacles, through a tradition and mentorship. And there were other military recruiting commercials that often harkened back to cultures of the samurai, or to knights and their code of chivalry and honor, the camaraderie that came along with this. And that contrasted very greatly to maybe what I learned as a mental health professional. If I look at something like the American Psychological Association's guideline for the psychological practice with boys and men. In that text, there are myriad ways in which is outlined how masculinity can be detrimental, maybe ways to accommodate this, to overcome the problems we had with our fathers or brothers, to be better people, but nothing about the positives. And yet, I think even for those of us who viewed ourselves, again, as not particularly masculine, as nerds, that there was so much in that masculine archetype that we realized was positive. Nerds love space cowboys as much as anyone ever loved John Wayne. Maybe we love those traditional cowboys too. We revered, Han Solo and King Arthur and Batman and Superman and Captain America. We appreciated Thor, both as a purely mythical god figure from Norse mythology, and then as a superhero. And in real life, we could look up to people, say, like Teddy Roosevelt, the youngest president ever, a towering intellectual, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, but also someone who was a rugged individualist, a military leader, a hunter, somebody who invited people into the White House to box and to wrestle and to test his strength, and realized that there was something inspirational there and positive in that psychology. So I began, after years of working in the military, to realize that my academic background involved a great deal of arrogance, and that there was much to be learned as much as I was teaching. Over a career, I've been privileged to serve with what unquestionably are some of the toughest men and women on earth, people who survived the unsurvivable. I deployed with people who I had helped in the psychiatrist's office, but then literally kept me alive as combat started around. I owe them a debt of gratitude for the protection, but what I didn't expect is the life lessons that I would also learn there. I learned that this advantage to hypermasculine behavior is not limited to combat. Indeed, many of my patients were able to transition from being captains of ships to captains of industry, from warriors to athletes, from comrades in battle to the best of friends, from mentors to Marines to the finest of fathers, brothers, husbands, nurturers at home. This is not what I taught them. This is what they had come to teach me. So I wanted to look into that. I wanted to put that in this series of videos, and it's also a book project that I'm working on. And I hope that you will help me with here in the comments and with other ideas. And I think it's important. If we look at any list of the most significant figures in any area, be they peacemakers, scientists, philosophers, or poets, at least 90 out of 100 are likely to be these stereotypically masculine men. Not all were physically strong or testosterone-laden in the literal sense of the word. Some of them were actually women. Many were homosexuals. Even a few might have been what now could have been thought of as trans. But, and correlation doesn't equal causation. I will acknowledge that other people were just overtly excluded from some of these opportunities. But even if you view male thinking as something that has been negative on the whole, a power structure that needs to be torn down, it's really important to understand how did these masculine men become the dominant power structure. If you want to destroy your enemy, you must first understand him. In this case, very much we're talking about him. But hopefully you can learn more from that. Sorry for the intervention, again, working late night in a psych ER. But I want to look into what is the source of masculine power? What do these warriors have? What is it that allowed men to succeed throughout history? What is it that we looked up to in those Marines in the commercial or in real life? What is the archetype of a perfect man, and how do we come to emulate that role? I want to look at the role of biology, but also of socialization. We'll look at how the idea of a man has changed over time and what has always remained constant. We'll talk about what philosophers said about the ideal man, what scientists say of his strengths. We'll look at what those strengths may be, but also more importantly, how they can be obtained. And I should point out that this book is not, or this video series that we're planning, is not a complaint against feminism or against feminine thinking. These have virtues in their own right. One of the chief strengths of masculine thinking should be self-confidence, an idea that we have no need to put down anyone else. I would encourage you to look at other sources that outline what feminine thinking can accomplish. It's just that here we want to examine the other side of that coin. We also don't want to ignore the faults of men or limit ourselves to the idea that only the testosterone-laden, stereotypic giant can benefit from masculine thinking. There are countless illustrations of women, Queen Elizabeth I of England being an obvious example, who was reputed to have said that I have the body of a woman, but the heart and stomach of a king. Also the psychology of one. It is certainly worth learning from such women, both why they were considered masculine thinkers despite their gender, and if they benefited from embracing this alternative. We'll also take note of differences between sex and gender and sexuality. We're not, again, going to blow those contexts off. And how legendary or fictional characters such as Achilles or real-world figures like Alexander the Great can simultaneously be both very masculine, hyper-masculine even, but also homosexuals, and what their experiences says about gendered thinking. We'll look at trans individuals and what living in both worlds teaches about the advantages and disadvantages. Again, I don't want to ignore those branches of psychology. It's just that there has been so much negative there. We will not neglect or apologize here for the stereotypically masculine. We will not concede that men are obsolete or that boys must be reformed, tamed, and feminized so that they can continue to exist in polite society. We will not belabor the failure of modern boys or the sins of long dead men. There are plenty of books or videos for that. Here, I want to look for the magic of the masculine mind, how it can make us better men. Tune in, help us out, leave comments, follow along. Thanks so much. We will continue.